As I sign the form to terminate my pregnancy, the doctor asks me for the third time, "You were willing to risk your health to keep this baby. What changed?" I press my hand to my belly. A bottle of essential oil. Yesterday, the moment I open the car door, a sharp wave of rosemary hits me and sends my morning sickness spiraling. I reach for the window, but Adrian Lockwood grabs my hand. "Don't open it. Sloane loves this scent. She'll be upset if it fades." I freeze. "I'm pregnant. This isn't safe for the baby." He frowns, his voice full of impatience. "Stop being dramatic. You always use the baby as an excuse. It's just essential oil. What's it going to do?" Then he pulls the bottle from the glove compartment, places it right next to my air vent, and cranks the dial higher. "Just tough it out. We're almost home. Sloane can't fall asleep without it." The smell thickens until my eyes sting and my temples throb. I don't say another word. I quietly unbuckle my seatbelt and get out. Adrian never indulges my moods. He leans over, slams the passenger door shut, and drives off. I stare at the ultrasound, at the tiny shadow that already has a heartbeat, and close my eyes. If he doesn't care about me, I don't need him either. The anesthesia kicked in and my eyelids grew impossibly heavy. Through the haze, my mind drifted back to a rainy night 5 years ago. Adrian Lockwood had shown up at my apartment door, eyes red-rimmed, and kissed me. It was the first time I'd ever seen him lose his composure. I found out later that Sloane Hartley had broken up with him and accepted someone else's proposal. He'd been drinking all night and crossed half the city to find me. He knew I'd been in love with him for years. He'd always known. After we got together, Adrian was good to me. He remembered my habits, gave me all the romantic gestures you'd expect from a boyfriend, and stayed up all night when I had a fever. I thought he genuinely wanted a fresh start. Then 3 months ago, Sloane came back, freshly divorced. Her return hit every crack between Adrian and me. The first time I saw her was the day she arrived. Adrian picked me up from work with a bouquet of chamomile, sitting in the passenger seat, and my heart lifted for a moment. Before I could say anything, he spoke first. "We're swinging by the airport to pick up Sloane on the way. She gets really carsick, so sit in the back." I froze, staring at him without moving. His eyes drifted toward the window. "She's just an old friend, and it's on the way. It's not a big deal." I gave a thin smile and climbed into the back seat. The whole drive, Sloane talked openly about how rough the past few years had been for her. Adrian barely said a single word, but his grip on the steering wheel kept tightening. Every time I glanced at the rearview mirror, his expression remained as tense as ever. I knew he felt sorry for her. I dropped my gaze and sat in the back like a stranger sharing a ride. When we pulled up to her building, Adrian got out without saying a single word and carried her bags. Through the car window, I watched her reach up on her tiptoes to brush something off his shoulder. He didn't pull away. The second time was when I found out I was pregnant. I rushed to his office with the test results, excited, only to find Sloane already there. She walked past me on her way out, trailing a heavy scent of rosemary. It was just the two of us then, and I looked at Adrian. "What is she doing here?" "Sloane's the new executive secretary." "Why didn't you tell me?" "It's a normal hire. I didn't see the need to mention it." My voice shook. "She's your ex." Adrian loosened his tie, irritation creeping into his voice. "Iris, when did you get so insecure? Things were complicated back then. Hiring her is proof I've moved past it. You need to stop reading into everything." My fingers tightened around the pregnancy report until the paper crumpled in my fist. Sloane had ridden in his passenger seat the day she got back, and now she was sitting in his office. What would come next? His heart was already wavering, and he still blamed me for being paranoid. I forced back the tears and walked out, nearly running into Sloane coming the other way. She didn't even bother hiding the smugness in her voice. "Give it time. He'll come back to me soon enough." Then the lights went out. When I woke up, my belly felt hollow, and something inside my chest felt like it had been carved away. Rain streaked the window, just as it had on the night Adrian showed up at my door 5 years ago. Only this time, he was already on his way back to her. I braced myself against the wall and made my way slowly out the hospital entrance. Wind cut through my collar and I shivered. The anesthesia had worn off, and dull cramps rolled through my lower abdomen in waves, like the baby's last way of reminding me it had been there. I turned on my phone, and messages flooded in. One was from Mom. It read, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I'd forgotten that it was my birthday. For the past 5 years, Adrian had always remembered. This was the first year he forgot too. My eyes burned. Then Adrian's name lit up the screen. The moment I picked up, I could hear noise in the background. "It's Sloane's birthday today. Some old friends insisted on getting together, so I can't make it to the prenatal appointment. Be careful getting there on your own." His tone was clipped, like he was trying to sound reluctant. 5 years together, and it had taken me until that day to realize that he never meant what he said. I wanted to tell him I'd already ended the pregnancy. But before I could get a single word out, Sloane's voice came through on his end. "Adrian, hurry up. Everyone's waiting for you to cut the cake. The line went dead. The screen dimmed and caught my reflection, as pale as paper. I let out a hollow laugh and slipped the phone into my pocket. On the way home, I passed the bakery Adrian used to take me to. A beautiful strawberry cake sat in the window. I lingered for a second, then kept walking. It was almost dark by the time I got home. I went to the bedroom to pack my things, though calling it our bedroom felt like a stretch. The day I found out Sloane was his secretary, we'd had a massive fight, and he moved into the study that same night. I'd been sleeping in the guest room ever since, 1,600 square feet split down the middle, with nothing between us but a hallway and everything falling apart. I opened the closet. The clothes inside were divided by season, mine on the left, his on the right. I'd ironed those dress shirts more times than I could count. From the early days of his company to now, I knew which shirt went where. Light blue for business dinners, white for client meetings, gray for late nights at the office, and never a single wrinkle at the collar or cuff. I took my own clothes down, folded them, and packed them into boxes. Everything I owned fit into 2 suitcases. When I finished, I sat on the couch and stared at 3 pieces of paper that no longer mattered. They were the prenatal report, the ultrasound, and the termination form I'd signed that morning. I ran my finger across the ultrasound, but it was just paper now. I didn't know how long I sat there before I heard footsteps in the entryway. Instinctively, I flipped the papers over and pressed them face down on the coffee table. Adrian came in reeking of alcohol and rosemary. He saw me and stopped. "Why are you still up? You're only 2 months along. You need to be more careful and stop staying up so late." I lowered my eyes and stared at my hands, my nails digging into my palms hard enough to leave a dull ache. He didn't even know how far along I'd been. My baby had been 3 months along. The termination form had that day's date stamped on it, printed clearly in black and white. But he hadn't even noticed. I suddenly didn't want to say anything at all. He didn't care, and nothing I said would change that. In his world, Sloane's scent was the one that couldn't be allowed to fade. I was just the replacement who happened to be there when Adrian was at his lowest, someone who would never truly matter to him. I stood up to head back to the bedroom, but he stopped me. "Iris." I paused without turning around. "That project you've been running for the past 6 months. Hand it over to Sloane." His tone was flat, almost casual. "Take it easy for a while. You shouldn't be pushing yourself so hard." I stood frozen. That project had been mine from the very beginning, from the initial pitch to the negotiations, from the proposal drafts to the execution plan. Every single step had gone through my hands. He knew how many late nights I'd pulled, how many revisions I'd pushed through. Handing the project to Sloane meant handing her everything I'd built. He knew exactly what he was asking, and he'd rather hurt me than tell her no. I turned to look at him. After a long pause, I managed a dry laugh. "Fine." I turned and went upstairs without saying another word. I was leaving anyway. There was no point fighting about it anymore. The next morning, I went to a law firm. Adrian and I had co-founded the company, and I held a 30% stake. Back then, he'd told me, "Iris, you've earned this." There had been light in his eyes when he said it, and I thought that was love. Looking back, that was just what I wanted to believe. The equity transfer agreement wasn't complicated, and I left it in my lawyer's hands. 30% of the company was enough to start over in a new city. After that, all I had left to do was go to the office and resign. I'd barely walked through the door when Adrian called me into his office, his expression dark. A document landed at my feet. "Iris, how could you make a mistake this big? It's a $20 million contract, but you wrote $200 million. Because of you, the company just took a $180 million loss." I froze for a second, then pushed past his anger and crouched down to pick up the contract, flipping straight to the last page. The number was right there in black and white. That's impossible. The company had put serious weight behind this project, and I'd checked that contract more times than I could count. There was no way I'd made that mistake. The version I prepared was correct. I looked up at Sloane, who was standing off to the side. She met my gaze, and the satisfaction in her eyes was impossible to miss. "You did this, didn't you, Iris?" Adrian's voice cracked through the room, and I went rigid. He stared at me, his brows furrowed. "You made the mistake and now you're blaming someone else?" I closed my eyes and forced myself to stay calm. This document was already finalized when I handed it off during the transition. There was nothing wrong with it. And I sent a copy to legal ahead of time. If you don't believe me, ask them to pull up the original version I submitted. Something flickered across Sloane's face, but she recovered almost instantly. Her voice wavered, turning tearful. "Iris, I'm just a secretary. You sent me the contract and I used it as is. I couldn't have changed it." She let her eyes drift toward Adrian. "Or maybe you just don't want me anywhere near Adrian, so you set me up to take the fall. But you could have just said that. You shouldn't have hurt the company to get at me." The moment the words left her mouth, Adrian turned to me with suspicion already hardening in his eyes. He'd practically convicted me on the spot. Is that true? I should have expected this, but my chest still ached. Adrian wasn't the type to jump to conclusions with most people, and he didn't let just anyone's word override his judgment. But Sloane was the exception. He'd believe whatever she said. I closed my eyes, swallowed hard, and steadied my breathing before pointing at the computer. Then call the police. Have the tech department pull the activity log from my computer. It'll show exactly when that document was modified and by whom. The room went silent. Sloane's fingers tightened around her sleeve, guilt written all over her. I scoffed. Too scared to do it. I pulled out my phone and opened the dial pad. If you won't, I will. I made a show of tapping the screen, and the sharp sound of a number dialing filled the office. Adrian lunged forward and grabbed my hand. Don't. I looked up at him. In that split second, his eyes were a mess of panic and something I couldn't quite name. It was like being doused in cold water, sobering and painful all at once. He was afraid that Sloane really had done it. Or maybe he already knew that she had, and was afraid of what it would look like if it got out. Yet he wasn't afraid of letting me take the blame. We stood there locked in silence until Sloane finally moved. She walked up to Adrian and took his hand. Adrian. Her voice cracked. It was me. Adrian glanced at me, then pulled his hand back awkwardly. Sloane, why would you do that? She dropped her head. Tears dripped onto the dark floor, and her voice broke. Adrian, I just wanted a fresh start with you, just like before. I still love you. Then I slapped her as hard as I could. Sloane cupped her cheek and stared at me in disbelief. Did you just hit me? I looked at her and coldly said, you framed me. Why wouldn't I? You stood before me and told my boyfriend that you love him. You're lucky it was only one. She had nothing to say to that. She glared at me with pure venom and raised her hand to hit me back, but with Adrian standing right there, she stopped herself and looked to him instead. Adrian clearly hadn't recovered. In all the time he'd known me, I'd always been easygoing, agreeable, never once out of control. This was the first time he'd ever seen me push back. He opened his mouth, and when he spoke, his voice had gone soft, almost conciliatory. Iris, why don't we just let this go? I'll cover the loss personally. Suit yourself. It had nothing to do with me anymore. I pulled free of his grip and walked out. When I returned, I was carrying a stack of contracts with my freshly printed resignation letter tucked inside. I held them out to him. Sign these. The shift had been too fast for Adrian to process. His eyes dropped to the papers in my hand, and he picked up a pen and signed everything without reading a single page. Just as I'd expected. All he wanted right now was to put the whole mess behind him, and he wasn't about to scrutinize anything I put in front of him. I exhaled, sent the signed resignation letter to HR, and drove out of the parking lot. I was stopped at a red light when Adrian's name flashed on my phone. I hesitated, then picked up. You tricked me into signing off on your resignation. It wasn't a question. He already knew. Yeah. Over what just happened. I told you I'd take care of it. I almost laughed. Adrian, in what capacity are you covering for her mistakes? He was quiet now. Is it because she still loves you? Through the phone, I could hear his breathing turn heavy. A long pause stretched between us. And just as I was about to hang up, he spoke. Believe me, whatever Sloane and I had is long over. When I didn't respond, urgency bled into his voice. I've already started planning our wedding. I almost laughed. 5 years together, and he'd never once said that. Not even when he found out I was pregnant. Saying it now was too late. He kept talking. Iris, we have a child on the way. Nothing has to change. Adrian. I cut him off, my voice steady. The baby's gone. Silence stretched down the phone line, so thick and heavy it felt like air. Turning to water. For 3 full seconds, Adrian didn't breathe. I could hear the faint ambient clinking of wine glasses behind him, the background music of Sloane's birthday party, fading into a muted hum against his sudden, ragged intake of air. What did you just say? His voice came back, stripped of all its usual arrogance, reduced to a hollow rasp. Iris, that's not funny. Don't say things like that. I'm not joking, Adrian, I said quietly. The traffic light turned green. I stepped on the gas, watching the rain streaking across my windshield in long, silver tears. I signed the papers yesterday morning, while you were driving around buying rosemary oil and organizing Sloane's birthday dinner. I was lying on an operating table. No. A metallic clang sounded through the receiver. He dropped something. Maybe his lighter, maybe his phone. No, you were just 2 months along. The doctor said. The doctor didn't say anything, because you never came to a single appointment. I interrupted, my tone utterly flat. I was 3 months along. The baby had a heartbeat, Adrian. It had hands. It had fingers. And every time I sat in your car, you let her fill the air with something that made me sick to my stomach, because Sloane couldn't fall asleep without it. Iris, wait, where are you? Stay where you are, I'm coming right now. Don't bother, I said. The apartment is locked. My key is on the kitchen Counter. My resignation is on your HR manager's desk. And my lawyer will be contacting you tomorrow regarding the liquidation of my 30% equity. Iris. Iris. I pressed the red button ending the call. Then without hesitation I slid my thumb across the screen, tapped his profile, and blocked his number. Sloane's was next. Then every mutual friend we had spent the last 5 years building relationships with. I drove straight to the airport, checked my 2 suitcases and boarded a flight to Chicago. I didn't look back at the city lights glowing beneath the wing as the plane lifted into the dark sky. For 5 years, I had built my life around a man who used me as an anchor while he pined for a storm. Now, I was letting go of the rope. An hour after my plane took off, Adrian pulled his Porsche up to the curb outside our apartment building, taking the stairs 3 at a time. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Iris, he yelled, slamming the heavy front door open. Iris. The apartment was pitch black. No lights. No smell of home-cooked dinner. No sound of the television playing low in the background. He threw on the light switch. The living room was immaculately clean, too clean. The throw pillows were neatly aligned, the air smelled faint of linen spray, and on the marble coffee table sat a neat stack of papers. Adrian walked toward the table, his knees trembling. He picked up the top sheet. It was a termination authorization form from St. Jude's Women's Hospital, dated yesterday, 8:30 a.m. Beneath it was an ultrasound scan. A faint, gray shadow rested in the middle of a dark circle. Printed at the top in clear, undeniable black ink. Gestational age, 12 weeks 4 days. Attached to the bottom was the doctor's handwritten note, scribbled in blue ink. Patient requested immediate termination despite previous high-risk preservation plan. Reason cited. Unfavorable domestic environment. Adrian dropped the paper as if it had burned his skin. Unfavorable domestic environment, he whispered to the empty room. He staggered back into the bedroom. The closet door stood half open. On the right side hung his neatly ironed dress shirts, light blue, white, gray arranged precisely by season. The left side was entirely, completely empty. Not a coat hanger remained. Not a stray shoe. Not even the faint scent of my jasmine perfume lingering on the wood. Suddenly, his phone buzzed violently in his hand. Sloane's name flashed across the screen. He answered, his voice barely audible. What? Adrian? Where did you go? Sloane's voice was high-pitched, laced with exaggerated concern. Everyone's asking for you. We haven't cut the cake yet. And my head is hurting again. Could you come back and pick me up? Adrian stared at the empty closet, at the void where 5 years of my life had just vanished without a trace. Sloane, he said slowly, his voice deadly cold. Yes, honey. Get out of my sight. If I ever see you near my office or my home again, I will personally see to it that every bridge you have left in this city is burned to ashes. Adrian? What are you saying? Is this about Iris? She's just throwing a tantrum. He hung up and threw his phone against the wall. The screen shattered into a spider web of glass, mirroring the hollow, agonizing crack echoing inside his own chest. 6 months later. Chicago. The glass wall of the corner office on the 42nd floor offered an unobstructed view of Lake Michigan, cold and blue under the late autumn sun. I set down my coffee cup, reviewing the final quarterly prospectus for Vance and Thorne Capital. Across the mahogany desk sat Marcus Vance, the firm's founding partner and my mentor from my early days in finance. You've outdone yourself, Iris, Marcus said, signing his name at the bottom of the ledger with a heavy gold pen. In just half a year, our Midwest tech acquisitions are up 40%. Pulling your equity out of Lockwood Tech when you did was the smartest play you ever made. I smiled faintly, picking up the dossier. It wasn't a play, Marcus. It was survival. Well, whatever it was, it left Lockwood in a tailspin. Marcus chuckled, leaning back in his leather armchair. Speaking of which, have you been keeping up with the news back home? I don't look backward, I said simply. You might want to take a glance at this one, Marcus said, sliding a copy of the Financial Times across the glass table. I glanced down at the headline on page 4. Lockwood Tech faces liquidation amid accounting scandal and mass resignations. My eyes scanned the article passively. After I left, Adrian had attempted to cover the $180 million contract discrepancy out of his personal funds, but without my oversight on the operations side, the firm's supply chain fell apart within 8 weeks. Sloane, promoted to chief operating officer in a desperate attempt to prove she was capable, had mishandled 3 major enterprise accounts, mismanaged regulatory filings, and eventually embezzled nearly $2 million from the company's escrow account to fund her own failing lifestyle. When Adrian finally discovered the theft, he tried to fire her, but Sloane turned around and threatened to leak confidential client data to the press unless he paid her off. The resulting legal battle drained Lockwood Tech's cash. reserves leading to a cascade of bank foreclosures. He tried to reach out to our legal department last week, Marcus added, watching my face carefully, looking for an emergency bridge loan. I turned him down flat, of course, but he did ask one question. What question? He asked if we had an executive on board named Iris Thorne. My secretary told him yes. I hear he's been buying a plane ticket to Chicago every weekend, just standing outside our building hoping to catch a glimpse of you. I closed the newspaper and pushed it back across the desk. He's wasting his money. The annual National Tech and Investment Summit is tonight at the Drake Hotel, Marcus said, tapping his watch. Our firm is accepting the Asset Management Firm of the Year award. You're giving the keynote address, Iris. He's going to be there. He bought a seat at the back table through a second-tier broker. I stood up, smoothing down the front of my tailored dark emerald silk suit. Let him watch, I said calmly. It's about time he saw what I look like when I'm not standing in anyone's shadow. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel was bathed in warm golden light, ringing with the polite clinking of champagne flutes and the low hum of high-stakes networking. I stood near the stage, surrounded by 3 regional directors from top-tier private equity funds, discussing market trends in quantum computing. I wore a backless emerald dress that brushed the floor, my hair swept up in an elegant chignon, diamond drop earrings catching the light every time I moved. I was no longer the quiet woman who ironed dress shirts late into the night, nor the exhausted pregnant girl who sat silently in the back seat of a car breathing in toxic rosemary fumes. And now, the speaker's voice boomed through the microphone. Please welcome the managing director of Vance & Thorne, Iris Thorne. The room erupted into applause. I walked up the stairs with effortless grace, stepped up to the podium, and adjusted the microphone. As I swept my eyes over the crowd of 500 industry leaders, my gaze caught a figure standing near the dark back doors of the ballroom. It was Adrian. In 6 months, he had aged a decade. The custom-tailored designer suits he used to pride himself on looked loose and crumpled on his thin frame. His dark hair was messy, streaked with premature gray at the temples, and his eyes were hollow red-rimmed, staring at me as if he had just seen a ghost. Our eyes met across the vast, glittering room. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I felt no anger, no sadness, no sudden spike in my pulse. There was only a cold, pristine stillness inside my chest, the absolute absence of feeling. I turned my eyes back to the teleprompter and began my speech. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. 5 years ago, I believed that growth was about preservation, about holding on to assets, holding on to legacy, holding on to what was familiar. My voice sounded clear, powerful, echoing through the speakers, holding the entire room spellbound. Adrian stood near the exit, his hand pressed against the dark velvet curtain, his chest heaving as if he couldn't get enough air into his lungs. He listened to every word, every sharp, brilliant analysis that came out of my mouth. The mind that had built his company, the woman he had treated like an inconvenient footnote. When the speech concluded, the room rose in a standing ovation. I accepted the crystal trophy, shook hands with the board members, and stepped down off the stage. As I made my way toward the private VIP lounge behind the ballroom, a shadow blocked my path in the dimly lit corridor. Iris. I stopped. 2 security guards stepped forward instantly, but I held up a hand, motioning for them to wait. Hello, Adrian, I said, my tone polite and distant, as if greeting a mid-level client whose name I barely remembered. Adrian took a trembling step forward. He looked utterly broken. His breath smelled faintly of cheap scotch, and his knuckles were raw. Iris, please, he choked out, his voice cracking on the second word. Just 5 minutes. Please. I begged Marcus. I begged your lawyers. Nobody would let me see you. Because I asked them not to, I said calmly, crossing my arms. You have 3 minutes, Adrian. I have a dinner hosted in my honor at 10. Tears sprang straight to his eyes, spilling down his gaunt cheeks without shame. I'm sorry, he whispered, falling to his knees right there on the carpeted floor of the corridor. Iris, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Didn't know you were 3 months along. I didn't know about the baby's heartbeat. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to ask, I replied, looking down at him without a shred of pity. You were too busy catering to a woman who left you the second someone else offered her a bigger diamond, only to run back to you when she ran out of money. I threw her out. Adrian sobbed, grabbing the hem of my dress with shaking fingers. I stepped back smoothly, pulling the silk out of his reach. She's facing federal fraud charges, Iris. I took everything from her. I destroyed her. I turned her over to the police myself. That has nothing to do with me, Adrian, I said softly. You didn't destroy Sloane because you realized you loved me. You destroyed her because she ruined your company and bruised your ego. You've always been the same. No. No, that's not true. He beat his fist against his own chest, right over his heart. It's been hell, Iris. Every night I go back to that apartment, and it's empty. Every time I open the closet, I see the space where your clothes used to be. I smell that damn rosemary oil everywhere, and it makes me want to rip my own skin off. I killed our baby. I drove you away. I ruined everything. You didn't kill the baby, Adrian, I said, my voice steady and deadly clear. I made the choice to end the pregnancy because I realized that bringing a child into a home where its mother was humiliated every day and its father was emotionally absent would be a cruelty. He shrank back as if I had struck him with an iron bar. I spared that child from having a father like you, I added softly. That was my final act of love for it. Iris, please. He wept, reaching out aimlessly, his palms open, begging. Give me a second chance. I don't care about Lockwood Tech. I don't care about the money. I'll start over. I'll be a junior analyst again. Just let me be near you. Let me earn back a fraction of what I lost. Suddenly, a loud commotion broke out at the end of the hall. Let go of me. I know he's in here. A disheveled woman pushed past the hotel staff. Her hair matted, her mascara smeared down her pale face. It was Sloane. She wore a faded designer coat, her wrists bare of the luxury jewelry she used to flaunt, her eyes wide and unhinged. She had clearly followed Adrian all the way from the airport. Adrian. Sloane screamed, lunging toward him. You bastard. The police came to my apartment today. They froze my accounts. You gave them the ledgers. Adrian didn't even look at her. He didn't move an inch off his knees. His tear-filled eyes remained fixed entirely on me, terrified that if he looked away for a single second, I would vanish forever. Sloane finally noticed me standing there in my emerald dress, gleaming under the warm lights, radiant, untamed, and entirely whole. Her face twisted into a mask of pure jealousy and rage. You, she spat, taking a step toward me. This is your fault. You turned him against me. You poisoned him. Take her away, I said quietly to the two security guards standing beside me. The guard stepped forward instantly, seizing Sloane by her arms and pinning her back. She thrashed and screamed like a madwoman, hurling insults as they dragged her backward down the hallway toward the waiting police cruisers outside. Adrian, tell them to let me go. You loved me. You loved me for 7 years. She shrieked, her voice echoing off the marble walls until it finally faded into the distance. Silence settled over the corridor once more. Adrian remained on his knees, trembling, his forehead pressed against the cold carpet, waiting for my judgment. I looked down at the man who had occupied 5 years of my youth, the man I had once believed was my entire world. I felt no hatred for him. I felt no desire for revenge. The greatest punishment you can inflict on a man who took you for granted isn't to ruin him. It's to show him that you can thrive so completely without him that his existence no longer matters to you at all. I took a breath, feeling the cool, clean air fill my lungs. Your 3 minutes are up, Mr. Lockwood, I said. Iris, please. He whispered, his voice barely a breath. Don't leave me in the dark. You chose the dark 5 years ago, Adrian, I said, turning my back on him. I just finally turned off the light. 1 year later, the summer sun shone brightly over the private harbor in Santa Barbara. The blue Pacific stretched out endlessly to the horizon, where white sails glided peacefully across the water. I stood on the deck of my new home, holding a glass of iced tea, listening to the gentle crash of the waves against the cliff. My phone chimed on the outdoor table. It was an email from my lawyer in Chicago, containing a final summary report on the liquidation of Lockwood Tech. The company was officially bankrupt. The physical office building had been auctioned off to a commercial real estate group. Sloane Hartley had been sentenced to 4 years in a state penitentiary for grand larceny and corporate fraud. As for Adrian Lockwood, he had sold his luxury sports car, lost his apartment, and taken a low-level consulting job at a small firm in his hometown, living in a rented studio apartment above a bakery. According to my lawyer's note, Adrian spent his weekends sitting alone on a park bench near the local hospital, holding a faded ultrasound photo that he kept tucked inside his wallet, never speaking to anyone, refusing to meet anyone new. I closed the email, locked the phone screen, and set it down on the table. A warm breeze blew off the ocean, carrying the sweet, clean scent of fresh citrus and blooming jasmine. I took a deep breath, smiled at the open sky, and walked down the steps toward the shore, ready for everything that came next.